Welcome to our first of the series for our Lunch and Learn. Today we're doing Plain Language Mythbusters. Thank you so much for allocating this time. I know time can be really precious, especially at lunchtime, but hopefully you get lots out of this and you find some really valuable insight into plain language. So my name's Yannicka and I am a Health Literacy and Plain Language Training Officer here at Enliven. And I also have Tia in the room with me as well, who will be helping with this session. So she'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A function as well as the chat function. We have them both open because I believe if you're on your phone, the Q&A function doesn't come up. So hopefully everyone in the room will have the opportunity to put in some questions if they'd like. And Tia's going to read them out to me later on in the session as well. But if there's something really relevant to what I'm saying, she will jump in and just let me know as well. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land and waterways where we grow and learn together. At Enliven, we recognise our personal obligation to respect this heritage, then their elders past, present and emerging, and support the future by striving for justice and reconciliation. So personally, myself, I'm coming from the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation's land and acknowledge that we're all dialing in from different lands today. Okay, so let's get started. For this Lunch and Learn, we have two learning goals that we've set for this session. We're wanting participants to learn some overall information about plain language, but the main focus of this Lunch and Learn is to bust those common myths around plain language. Now, I do want to acknowledge that it is a really big topic, plain language, and we've got 30 minutes. I will make sure I put in some information about what plain language is, but I do want to spend a really big chunk of the time talking about what it's not, unfortunately, but that is the Mythbuster section of this presentation. I think that it's a really big barrier around plain language. And hopefully by clearing up some of these myths, it will open up people's minds to learning about plain language and using it in their workshop. So my goal for this session is to advocate for plain language. So plain language is all about the reader and it empowers them to make informed decisions. Communication is one of our most powerful tools, and in most roles, we rely on written communication. And if we can do this well, we can have better outcomes for everybody. Okay, I do want to start with a slide about what plain language is, just so that we're all on the same page. The International Plain Language Federation tells us that communication is plain if the language, structure, and design is so clear that the intended audience can find what they need, understand what they find, and use that information. So I have highlighted the key components of this description here, which is about language, it's about structure, and it's about design. And we want people to be able to find, understand, and use information. All right, and that's pretty much as simply as I can put it when I've got a really short amount of time. But I'll jump into some mythbusters now, and then we'll chat a little bit more about what plain language is. Okay, so mythbuster number one I have here is plain language is dumbed down language. It's simple-minded and it talks down to people. So the fact is plain language is really not oversimplifying information. It's about writing information that better suits your reader, which is both inclusive and respectful. So in fact, it is actually all about the reader. Myth number two I have here is plain language is changing your text to simple words. Plain language uses several techniques to present information clearly. Yes, this includes words, but rather than simplifying words, we're looking at words that are familiar to your reader. So it's about being really clear with our words rather than just simplifying them, but it's also carefully considered logic, layout, and design as well. Okay, plain language is reducing the number of words in the document. Okay, so the fact here is plain language is actually not about the words at all on the page. It's not about the number of words, apologies, on the page. And I've got a quote here that I think sort of sums this up really well. No matter the country, people will prefer extra words if those words help to explain a term that is not intuitive to them. Okay, the myth here is plain language looks too simple. Some would say unprofessional. I must admit, I've put this one in because this is actually something that has been said to me when I've tried to explain what I do in my job. And I'm not going to lie, it really annoyed me when they said it. But then I realized they're actually saying what a lot of people are thinking. And I found myself wanting to whip out some examples and show people what plain language is and isn't, and potentially what they're sort of picturing, and maybe they're not aligning with what I'm saying I do for work. Obviously, I don't bring out printable documents to my family Christmas, so I wasn't able to do that in this situation. But it is something that I bring along to a lunch and learn workshop. So my next couple of slides are all about the visuals and trying to show you what plain language can look like. So the fact is, plain language can look really professional. So this is a project that we worked on where we took information about primary aldosteronism, and I'm very proud that I can say that word so clearly now. It did take a long time. And we created some resources that a GP could hand out. So I actually think they look great. They look really professional and potentially not what people picture when I say that I create plain language resources. So, who pictured this when I started talking about plain language? Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people nodding their head right now, and you're not alone. This is what most people think that I do when I say that I work in plain language. So this one here is actually an example of a document that's written in easy English. And this example was created by Scope, who specialise in creating easy English resources. We don't at Enliven, so this isn't actually our specialty. Easy English is not only further simplified language, but it also has a lot of rules around the number of words, the number of images, lots of the spacing requirements that don't actually apply to plain language and our plain language principles that we put in our work. Easy English is written for anyone who has difficulty reading English, especially those with low health literacy levels, maybe a learning disability, or those that don't have English as their first language. Okay, so that's easy English. Plain language is actually written for everyone. And that's something that I really want you to take away from this presentation today, is that it really is about writing for everybody, every reader. Now, I have slipped in just one more example here. This is actually an Enliven created resource. It is a plain language resource, but this one's been specifically designed for a multicultural audience. So this is one of the projects that we done that was funded by Donate Life, and it is around organ and tissue donation. So for this resource, we actually went through a co-design process. And in that process, this is actually the design that they asked for. If you look us up or if you jump onto our website and have a look at a lot of resource that we have, they do look like this. And that's because we do a lot of work for our multicultural community, and that's what they're asking. It does sort of lead into the aesthetics of easy English, but it follows the plain language principles here. And the number one plain language principle is what your audience wants. So while we can create resources that look like the primary aldosteronism one, when we're being asked to create resources that look a little bit more like the easy English style, we do create that. But you can see here that we've put a lot more information in there still. All right. I'm not going to lie, when I was putting this presentation together, this sort of felt like a bit of a mic drop moment. Okay. So I was really excited to be able to show you what plain language is, and that it's not this easy English imagery that people are seeing. So the last 3 slides are my new power move, and I think I might be carrying some printed resources out to my family get-togethers so I can really show them what plain language is. But in all seriousness, I really hope that these visuals have helped you see what plain language is and given a new light on plain language. So when I keep carrying on about it, you'll be able to picture the same thing that I'm picturing. That isn't the end though. I do have more myths to discuss, and also then we'll talk about what some plain language things are as well. Okay, so this one may actually surprise a few people, but plain language does not mean jargon free. Okay, so the myth here is plain language means jargon free. Many people have probably heard of Drop the Jargon Day. We do hear a lot of health professionals talk about being jargon free, and this is definitely something that comes up when we run our workshops, when I ask people what they believe when they hear plain language. Um, Plain language is written for the reader, so avoid anything the reader would consider to be jargon. So the key here is knowing your audience and what would work for them. So I do have a quote here that sums it up quite nicely. The definition of plain depends on the audience. What is plain for one audience may not be plain for another audience. And I think that it's really important to remember this. So if we're writing a resource and it's specifically for the medical industry, it's just going out to GPs, then absolutely we're going to use that terminology. And that's really relevant for the audience. Another side or another example of where jargon's really relevant, or what could be considered jargon, but it's really relevant, is when we're creating resources for, say, Indigenous communities. You'll really notice that it's becoming a bit more common to actually adopt the jargon or the style of wording that the intended audience would use. So in an Indigenous resource, one that we were creating not that long ago, we were talking about focus groups or advertising focus groups, and it referred to having a yarn or a yarning circle. So to many, that could be considered jargon, but we knew our audience and we knew it was really relevant to actually be speaking in the way our audience are going to understand. So it's not necessarily drop the jargon for everything. Okay, so your document is in plain language if a readability level is 5 to 7. I would argue that this is the most common myth in plain language. And I'm not going to lie, when I started doing plain language training, this is something that was incorporated in our training, referring to reading levels. We never said that it was, the be all and end all, but we did refer to readability levels. We no longer do. The fact that plain language is not about, the fact is plain language is not about reading levels. Readability formulas are very commonly used and are referred to a lot in the plain language industry, but realistically, they have the wrong focus. The algorithms that they rely on have no idea who you're talking to, what they need to know, how they're accessing the information, what they're trying to do, and also what people already know about the topic. And this does actually make me think about AI as well, which I haven't included in this presentation, but it is a barrier around that as well, all of these points that we have here. So things like ChatGPT, don't consider these things. at the moment. So it's really important to understand for yourself what plain language is. And even if you are using something like ChatGPT, that you're able to put in those requests and make sure that these dot points are being considered here too. Online tools like ChatGPT or algorithms that are used in readability checkers just can't replace that human element that addresses these dot points. Okay, so last myth that I have here is plain language takes too long and costs too much. We hear this one more and more lately as well. Um, Plain language, yes, it can take a bit of time to learn, but it really has the potential to save you and your organization a lot of money. So think about how much time goes into non-compliance issues, repeat appointments, customer service and complaint lines, low engagement rates. Honestly, this could be a whole nother webinar topic in itself, but you can imagine how much these things are costing organizations a lot of money and how there is an opportunity to save time and money with clear communication. There is also a bit of research out there as well around this, so maybe I've just figured out our next topic there as well. Okay, so that was the last of the Mythbusters section of the presentation, and I think we're going pretty well with time. So I will just quickly run through a little bit of what it is, what plain language is, just because I don't want to leave you with all these what it's not, and then I'll jump into answering some questions. So please do pop some questions in there if you have any. So today we've learned that plain language is about familiar words, clear sentences, and carefully considered design, structure, and logic. We saw in the examples that I showed the use of accessibility content, so things like fonts and contrasts, and the use of images and graphs. But most importantly, the thing that I want you to take away from today is that plain language is all about the reader. And how do we keep it about the reader? We do this by aligning with the 4 key principles of the International Plain Language Standard. So the International Plain Language Standard is a standard for guidance, meaning it's not mandatory, but it does provide a set of guidelines, strategies, and best practice principles. And I'll get Tia to pop the link in the chat for anyone that wants to learn more about it, because it is a great resource when you're looking into plain language there. I've included this slide here just around what the 4 guiding principles are. So we're looking at relevance, findable, understandable, and when you get those 3 outer layers right, you should have a usable document. So the aim here is that readers are getting what they want, so that's what they need. They are then able to find this information. They're able to understand the information they've found, and then they're actually able to use this information. That's just a very, very quick overview of plain language. We do address these principles quite in depth in our workshops. I do think we have one date with our workshop available on our website at the moment, which is an online one where people can sort of jump on and purchase a ticket to learn about these individually. But the bulk of what we do is organizational workshops where we actually come out to you, or it's online, and we go through these 4 principles really thoroughly, and then we work through some activities with those as well. So I believe T does have a link that she can put up with information around how to inquire about that as well if anyone's interested. Okay, so that was my presentation part of the workshop or the lunch and learn. So I will sort of pause and allow for time for some questions now. I am aware that the mics and the cameras aren't on at the moment, but I'm hoping that Tia can maybe let me know if there's any questions in there, or if anyone really does want to ask any questions verbally, just raise your hand and I'm pretty sure it will allow me to unmute you as well.
We can get started with one great comment that we've received in the chat. I recently received advice on making sure my communication is at a year 9 level, as I've received some feedback that my comms is not always easy to understand or too high level. So interesting point. Thank you for raising about the reading levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really common. And actually, a lot of organizational style guides do still refer to readability levels as well. Um, you can absolutely still use a readability checker, and a lot of them are actually built in now. So I know like PDFs and Microsoft Word has one built in that you can actually have a look. And it doesn't hurt to have a look and see what it says, but just really try keep those points that I was sort of mentioning in the back of your mind, because it's not actually having that human lens on what you're actually um, writing.
Thanks for that. Another question from the chat. Is co-design common to use when developing plain language documents?
Yeah, so I'd like to think it's common. We do use it quite a lot. We're very lucky to be very connected with a large multicultural network that we do engage their services to be able to co-design with us. Ultimately, I think one of our biggest challenges as anyone producing resources is understanding what our community or what our audience wants. And that's where co-design has a really large impact on the work that we do. Yeah.
Lovely. To let you know, Yannicka mentioned you can raise your hand. I am able to enable you to take your mics off of mute. So feel free to unmute yourself at your end if you've raised your hand and ask the question. In the meantime, we do have another question in the chat. What support do you provide to each staff? Would like to discuss some projects on the go at the moment regarding co-design reports.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those from each that are in the room, and we'll just for clarification to anyone else, so Enliven is a service of each. So we are one of the teams that sit under the each umbrella. In regards to anyone that's from each that's in the room, please reach out. I will share my email at the end as well. We'd love to have a conversation with you. So myself and Silva would love to have a conversation with any of the teams within each to know how we can help with the projects that you're working on. And I can see Gemma has her hand up, and I think you're enabled now if you'd like to unmute yourself, Gemma.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. You able to hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you perfect, Gemma.
Yep. I was hoping, I know this might be a rather specific question, but I find that a lot of the documents that get co-designed and produced that have like linked or circular concepts can just end up getting overly wordy and sounding self-referential to please see this point here and this links into here. And I'm like, what methods or templates do you think would be used to like help assist? Because I think one thing you definitely mentioned was just clarity of the overall concept.
Yeah, I think without knowing the specifics around the document you're talking about, I think ultimately honing down on what the key message is and what the key purpose of the document is. So I would say quite often, if you really keep questioning who the audience is, what they need, and what information really needs to be in there, you can probably cut a lot of it out. If it needs to be in there, maybe it needs to be more than one resource.
Brilliant. So probably have more of a focus on the purpose of the document rather than constantly trying to like define what it is, and maybe leave that wording to areas if it's not like intuitive.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And then you can always have a supplementary resource that explains something if it's a concept that's a little bit more in detail. So, for example, with our primary aldosteronism one, that had to be a whole series. To put everything into one document wasn't realistic.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that.
No, that's okay. Thanks for the question.
We have 2 questions in the chat. We also have a hand up, and for that participant, I have enabled your mic if you'd like to take yourself off mute. So while you're doing that, the first one in the chat, is there a tool or a website we can use to check whether our resources are in plain language or to guide us through amending documents as necessary?
Okay, so there is the International Plain Language Standard that does help you guide you through the different elements of plain language that you can sort of check off your document with. That is behind a paywall, so I just will flag that as well, but we will share that link, and that's what we use to guide ours. I'm not sure what sector you're from, but we do have an incredible resource that is all around the ISO standards, but used in the context of the health industry. And that one is available for free and does go through a lot of the principles in a health context. So I think I just saw it pop up that Tia's popped it in the chat, but do have a look at that. Hopefully that is helpful as well. And even if it's not within sort of the health context, it does go into a bit more explanation around what those principles are. So that might be able to guide you a little bit as well.
I'm just waiting a moment because I think the other participant with their hand up did unmute.
Yeah.
Yes,
I just didn't want to interrupt anyone. Is that okay for me to ask my question now?
Perfect. Go for it, Isabella. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm fairly new to, I suppose, communicating with a large and diverse sort of general audience, and I'm just wondering, and this is why I attended this workshop, because I'm learning so much, even though it's just a short one. How do you approach immersing yourself in that community or that audience to ensure that you are actually catering your language for them? Because I know that I have misconceptions, or I believe, oh yeah, like that's exactly that, they should understand that, and then I get feedback from someone else saying like, no, like they have no idea, like it's too hard, or the language that you're using, what does this mean? And I just assume that it's because I've been told, oh yeah, this is, that's sort of the I guess history, or that's the language that's been historically used, that is, what I can communicate with. So how do you approach that, sort of immersing yourself in that, and then getting feedback without having to necessarily always have that feedback with, because not everyone's going to provide their feedback, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say this is where the co-design process is really, really helpful. But I do fully acknowledge that not everyone has a network of people that they can sort of call upon, or necessarily the budget to be able to engage in a co-design team as well. Something that I constantly say in our training sessions is that plain language isn't a individual thing, it's a team sport. And all I can say is talk, ask questions, show it to as many people as possible. Honestly, the amount of things that I've sort of shown to my husband or my kids, or Tia knows, I'll pop over to her desk and pop it in front of her and say, can you let me know what would you do in the next steps? Do you know what to do next? Would you understand this? Getting people that aren't in that industry as well, aren't in the same industry, is a really important thing as well.
We do have one more question and a comment, but I'm conscious of time.
Okay, I'm happy to quickly answer the last question if you like. People can log off if they need to. That's absolutely fine.
Great. My team of volunteers come from all walks of life. It is a huge and varied demographic. How do you arrive at the happy medium for a large, diverse group?
I think that's a really, really good question. And I guess you've got the blessing that you have such a diverse group, and you've got a lot of people that you can sort of draw information on. But at the same time, that can be really challenging as well. I would say that in that case, you would definitely be avoiding any form of jargon that could be culturally relevant for one and not the other. And just making sure that everything you're putting in your information, like in terms of the terminologies that you're using, are going to be really, really common. So don't rely on any of that sort of back knowledge in the information that you're putting in. I can see that this question would also be really relevant for what information that you include. And I think this is where you're going to have to just keep going back to what that key purpose of the document is. So I know we constantly say it is all about the reader, but you're also going to have to sort of draw on those organizational things of what information why are you developing the resource, and what information is really important that you're going to get across to that community as well. Okay, hopefully that helps for everybody. Thank you so much for coming along. As I alluded to before, we do hope to be able to make this a bit of a series, and we'll continue to bring out some new content each time, just to get people to start learning about plain language. But if you do have any burning questions, I really am open to you emailing me or contacting me. I do have the stuff on the details on the screen there, our website, and then I've just also popped my email, as well as our health literacy email, which our whole team receives as well. Thank you so much.